Your expected approach time 3-4, approach button 17, the altimeter 2997.
To the DCS Situation Report, everyone. I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog, and it's good to be back after a week off to recharge the batteries last weekend, and my wife and I got to explore parts of Minnesota's North Shore, where we had fabulous weather and a lot of fun staying in a kind of treehouse overlooking two harbors, which was a lot of fun. Now, today's video focuses on the Sinai map by third-party developer WWII. This comes hot on the heels of last week's other interesting revelation about the KFIR aircraft being released by yet another third-party module maker. Let's begin, though, with the map news this week. Now, ED described that we are getting a brand new map to embellish the growing list of maps, which now span the globe in various sizes. Now, this particular region will encompass a 15 by 1,000 kilometer block, of which a 7 by 700 kilometer section will be in high detail. It will include the Sinai Peninsula, eastern Egypt and the Nile Delta, southern Israel including Gaza, and parts of western Jordan and Saudi Arabia. As is expected, the area is rich in landscapes ranging from agricultural areas, coastlines, mountains, rivers, and of course deserts. Now, the period of development is basically set for modern day, 2000s up to present, and will include up to 40 airfields, both civilian and military. We will see military bases and facilities, which should see a rich opportunity for historical and, of course, fictional campaigns. And as I said, it's rather timely given last week's news about the KFIR. Now, the expanding list of Cold War aircraft is producing a good deal of excitement right now in the community, and a very viable subset of aircraft to conduct online-based conflict, as discussed by the folks running the Enigma server. With Magnitude 3 set to overhaul the MiG-21, and of course Heat Blur are working hard on that Phantom, the Cold War potential is becoming a pretty hot prospect right now. Looking at these early screenshots from WWII, I think this map looks very, very, very promising, and the team are going to push out the map in what they say are 3 stages. The first 2, they indicate, will be ready in early access. The third will come later and apparently comprises additional Egyptian military airfields. Now, I think this map should satiate the desires of a broad player base, some of whom were less than enthusiastic about the Kola Peninsula map that was announced a few weeks ago. Not quite sure really why there was so much negative or knocking of the map, but I thought the Kola Peninsula looked interesting, but certainly this Sinai map will have great appeal, in my opinion. Now, Spudknocker posted a video today where he also began postulating on what he considered absences in sections of the map that he thought should be included so that they could be linked up to the Syrian map and join the two at some point, which seems like a logical thing to do. Now, in fairness though, ED has already signaled that they plan to increase the playable areas of the maps that they have and link up more, in effect creating much more of a global play theater. Now, in terms of maps, Spud also suggested maybe a different pay model needed to be introduced to allow a broader player base more access to all of the maps without having to pay large sums for individual ones. Now, it sounds good in theory, but I disagree. I actually think this model would be bad news for ED and sets up some challenges for ED in terms of supporting the developers of the maps appropriately, and in terms of how much they receive for the work that they've rendered, if you see what I mean. One of his followers actually suggested that maps be free to play online for online play, which is what he was alluding to, where he was trying to get people to play together in large groups, which is similar to the IL-2 format. Now, this is probably a pretty sound suggestion when you consider that most of ED's players are solo anyway, and I think where we're going to run into problems with a subscription is that the solo player base are not going to really bite on that if they're basically paying for maps they don't want anyway and would rather enjoy the solo form of playing. So we'll see. It's an interesting discussion. Let me know what you think. I believe too we need to focus on the broader picture here. Regardless of what you consider worthy of purchasing or not, it's really important to acknowledge the benefit of all these extra developers that are coming on board right now with the DCS franchise and Eagle Dynamics. It shows whether it's the South Atlantic map, Syria, or Sinai, ED's map-making software is capable of producing just about any environment that we have in the world, and we have a growing number of additional developers who are willing to produce those environments, and that is what I'm really excited about. It's really supportive of the community, and of course it supports the franchise where we want to be able to do realistic sim flying, combat sim flying, but also have some really exciting places to do it. We add in things like dynamic weather, which is coming, things like sandstorms maybe in the Middle East, or certainly more violent weather and less hospitable climes like the bottom of the South Atlantic. Then we have some really fun and dynamic possibilities for really interesting missions, campaigns, and of course player versus player or player versus environment situations. So it's a good time to be a sim pilot in DCS world. Let me know what you think, if I'm right, if I'm wrong, if you have another opinion about all of this. Throw your comment in below and we can chat about it. Now, in addition to yet another brand new map, and I want to stress here, remember, continuing with the theme, that this is actually the third map, the Sinai map, that we have either announced in 2022 or is already been released, such as the South Atlantic. Now, ED, remember, is also polishing up its World War II version of the Marianas Islands map. Now, this basically would make it a fourth map if this was released, because many of the islands at the time were largely covered in palm plantations and small villages while they were under Japanese control. So the ED team basically have had to do a tremendous amount of work building an authentic period piece map to reflect what was there at the time. Again, effectively, it's a new map on that basis, as obviously a number of facilities were likely not there, or if they were there, they've been bulldozed and built over. So that creates a lot of work for ED. Even the coastline may have changed with ports and the expansion of facilities, etc., etc. So it's a lot of work to revamp that and create a more authentic map for the time period. Now, one thing they are going to include, of course, is the Japanese airfields, where the napalm bombs were first used against Japanese soldiers, which is a pretty horrific weapon. Certainly the Pacific War saw some of the most vicious fighting of the World War II period, which often came down to close quarters fighting against entrenched positions. I was just thinking of my own grandfather, who was with the Royal New Zealand Air Force during the Pacific Theatre, and unfortunately he didn't really impart many of the stories, as was the way with some of those World War II vets, of his time in the Pacific Theatre as a maintainer of aircraft and a loader. Now, family members advised that he had to apparently scramble for cover when a Japanese aircraft strafed the runway that they operated on, and he also apparently described a rather spooky story when he left to go back to, I guess, New Zealand, probably via Australia. He was scheduled to be on a plane, and he actually changed his mind and swapped his spot with another soldier. That plane, unfortunately, never made it back and was never really found. So there's a story there that I need to research. Somewhere in there must be some information about that incident with the New Zealand Defence Force archive somewhere in the bowels of a building in Wellington somewhere. Maybe I can dig that out one of these days or find out a way to research that. But it sounds like a rather interesting story, and I do have some of my grandfather's records, but I digress. So in terms of Magnitude 3's Corsair, I will update at some stage any progress there, and of course that will feature some assets that comes with that aircraft, I believe, including the Essex class carriers, which will be a major embellishment to this map's appeal if you can put those assets there. And remember that ED, I believe, are also building additional assets for that as well, so stay tuned. Now, as previously mentioned, last week we saw the announcement of this brand new aircraft, the KFIR, which is being built by Aviron. Now, essentially, this aircraft is an Israeli version of a modified Mirage 5. The development came about due to French trade embargoes on arms, so basically the Israelis had to get creative. Now, one of the things they did was fit it with an American-designed J79E engine, which also basically meant that they have restrictions on exports of the aircraft because that requires US State Department approval. Now, it is being operated by various air forces around the world, including Ecuador, Sri Lanka, and I believe Colombia, but it was first introduced to the Israelis in the mid-1970s. Now, that J79E engine required quite a lot of extensive modification to the aircraft, including widening of the air intakes, and they also needed extra cooling in the tail to keep that engine cool, and they had to basically chop off parts of the fuselage. So quite a lot of, as I said, ingenious and creative work that went on there. They also included the forward canards, which added to the aircraft's excellent low-speed maneuverability, which was good for its multi-role capability. Now, as I said, it's actually still flying today, and believe it or not, there have been enough upgrades to it, depending on particular variants, to effectively make it a 4th-gen aircraft. We'll have to wait and see exactly what we get for DCS World, but expect, again, a multi-role aircraft. It's a delta wing, and it should be fairly capable in the appropriate theater and, of course, the appropriate hands. Stay tuned again. Let me know what you think of this aircraft, and we'll see how things develop over the course of the coming months.
Who's in that jet? Is that Prickly? Oh, yeah.
Now, some of you may have noted that Heatblow's Nick Dackard was willing to sit down with Baltic Dragon and Bell Geode of the Air Combat Experience recently to discuss what's happening with development with the Heatblow team. And there weren't really a whole lot of Easter eggs or revelatory statements that we didn't really already know, although the team are producing 2 more free campaigns for the Tomcat, which is exciting, and are working currently on the RWR system for the A variant, which will allow them to produce Iranian versions of the aircraft. There will, of course, be additional liveries added as well, which is exciting news. Now, the A6E, apparently the AI variant that they have been working on, was supposed to be released last year, but apparently it wasn't ready, and they are wanting to get that aircraft in play to aid in some of the campaigns and missions that they are building as well for the Tomcat. Now, there's no timeline again on a full fidelity release, and of course, as a 2-seater for a full fidelity, the AI component is going to have some challenges to produce the Bomber Navigator AI functionality. Stay tuned for more information on that when it comes to hand. Now, we appear to be on track, I believe, with the Phantom. Again, we're probably looking around about Q4, but no specific dates or early access dates for a release were announced. Work done with the Tomcat, of course, has assisted the team with the Phantom project in terms of the backseater development, and it seems that the team have been on board with the project since about the time they released the Tomcat. Remember that there was talk many, many years ago from Bell Simtech, who are basically now absorbed into Eagle Dynamics, that they were going to produce a Phantom, and it was all rather silent for a long, long period of time. And then last year we got that fantastic announcement that Heatblow were, of course, going to make the Phantom. So again, no timelines here, no specifics in terms of there being a release, but stay tuned. I imagine the team will, in due course, give us some, I expect, more interesting announcement on updates to that aircraft. Similarly, of course, we had no real specifics regarding the EF or the Eurofighter. We know, of course, it is going to be something of a hybrid aircraft involving a lot of different variants that they're going to, what Nick described was going to be a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster of an aircraft, and not because it was going to be ugly or because it was going to be bastardized, but basically it was a fictional version of what a potential Eurofighter could be. And this is because of the information that they have available to them, so on and so forth. Some people will probably balk at that information, but it made sense based on what he was describing. Now, I expect that there weren't any major revelations because True Grit were not represented there, and I would imagine that any more interesting information or major development updates will be with the approval of True Grit, and I would imagine their stamp will be on it because, of course, primarily it is their program, and it is one that the community are very, very much looking forward to. So right now, even though we didn't get a lot of information, I suspect no news is good news, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, the team indicated interest in actually doing a Draken and also the Tornado, but these were not signals in any way, shape, or form that they were secret projects or ones that they were intending to do. Rather, they were ones that, yes, if they have the time or if they have licensing and etc., they would do them. And Nick basically said that as developers, often they want to do the same aircraft that many people in the community also want to see. So sometimes those ideas and concepts tie together, believe it or not. We'll have to be content right now with the projects that are in hand, but any additions of this nature will certainly excite the community. Similar to the Phantom, I would imagine that Heatblue will keep their cards very close to their chest, and if a major project like that was ever to come to a possibility, we will see some sort of announcement very similar to what we saw with the Phantom, which right now is one of the more eagerly anticipated aircraft in the game, and is going to be a massive addition to the Cold War servers as previously described. Now, speaking of projects that are on board, Razbam showcased a few more pics of the F-15 Strike Eagle this week. Remember, the team are aiming also for a 2022 release like the Phantom. The signs are pretty positive. It's achievable, but like the Phantom, of course, it's a matter of hurry up and wait. Take my money now. And then the bottom line is we just have to wait and see, because we don't really know how or when they're going to get that out and if it's going to be on time. There is still quite a lot of work to be done by the looks of things, particularly with a new AI that Razbam are creating for limited portions of the back seat. Now, I know they originally said that they were not going to create any AI, but earlier this year, Ron Zambrano indicated that they were going to do certain aspects of the back seat for AI just to allow a single player to still achieve some things that, although it's 99% front seat capable, there are some things that they wanted you to be able to do. So it's going to be interesting how that comes to fruition and what they have in mind there and how that will look. It will not be a Jester. It's not a full AI system like Heatblue have developed for Jester, but it is going to mimic some of the things that we've already seen in game to, like I said, be able to conduct certain activities that are only available to be done in the back seat. So stay tuned on that.
The F5 is a lot like any kind of general aviation, is put some trim in. So in this instance for the F5, it needs a lot of nose down trim. Put in a few notches of trim, neutralize the stick, see how it reacts. Bring it back to the attitude you want, put in some more trim, neutralize, and just keep working it that way.
Now, ED updated also last week, work progresses on various AI assets, including, of course, the B-1 Lancer, and also animations to soldiers, which should give more realistic experience to us as they move from point A to B or move around. Remember that the B-1 Lancer is being overhauled for the AI, and also the Viking S3 and the B-52 bomber are getting a much needed overhaul, shall we say, especially the S3, which when you're trying to refuel from it is pretty blocky in terms of the graphics, and I think that's going to be a nice experience now when that gets done, so stay tuned. All right, well, there you have it, a bit of a double episode this week, including information from the last 2 weeks, and I guess this brings us to the end of another DCS sit rep. Let me know what you think of the prospect of this new map, and of course the third-party aircraft, the KFIR. I'm very pleased to see this growth in the franchise because it signals big things for the game, which benefits in users like myself and of course you that are listening, and shows a bright future for my future sim piloting experiences. Let me know if you agree, and you can do that by posting in the comment section below, sharing the video, liking, and of course don't forget to subscribe. It helps the channel chug along, and if you really want to support the channel a little bit more than just that, you can also hit the super thanks button. For the price of a cup of coffee, you can support the channel just a little bit more, and I really appreciate it. And as always, of course, I don't expect it. We'll see you next time on the DCS Situation Report. This is Prickly Hedgehog out. Take care, everyone. Carry on flying, and we'll see you next time.